Good evening and welcome to Scotland at 7. My name is Nena Bardwaj. Dr. Christine Blasey Ford, who has accused Judge Kavanagh of sexually assaulting her when they were teenagers, gave testimony today at the Senate Judiciary Committee hearing. We have our full statement for you at the end of the programme. The children's ward at St John's Hospital in West Lothian will not fully reopen until adequate and safe levels of staffing are established, as MSPs have been told. The hospital had to stop accepting night patients last year due to fragile staff levels. However, the Health Board has been working to restore a 24-hour inpatient service amid pressure from MSPs. Health Secretary Jean Freeman made a statement regarding this at Holyrood, which we have a clip of for you now.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I'm grateful for the opportunity to update members about the progress on provision of paediatric services at St John's Hospital in Livingston. I want to begin by emphasising my commitment to St John's and by recognising the excellence and dedication of the staff who work there to care for and serve patients and families in the surrounding communities. It is important to say why an interim service model for the inpatient paediatric ward at St John's Hospital has been implemented. In July 2017, the Scottish Government was advised by NHS Lothian that staffing levels were fragile and that there would have been no backup available if a member of staff was absent at short notice. In these circumstances, there would have been an immediate withdrawal of the inpatient service, causing confusion and anxiety for parents and with possible delays in emergency care. As a result, the Board took the decision to implement an interim service model in the best interest of children and their families. Within this interim model, however, the majority of children's services have been maintained at St John's. This includes the children's ward being open from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. 7 days a week, providing a short-stay paediatric assessment service. The paediatric ward remaining open for day surgery activity, as well as planned day case procedures and programmed investigations. Paediatric outpatient services, neonatal services and community child health services have all been unaffected. The assessment unit has seen nearly 2,800 children since July of last year and has also seen over 2,000 planned investigation unit attendances. The emergency department continues to see over 11,000 attendances a year, and outpatient clinics have seen over 4,000 new and review patients. The Board have evolved the interim model since it was first implemented, and this has seen a drop in the number of children who have been transferred but not admitted to RHSC in Edinburgh. When the interim model began, it averaged 12 children a month. Since March this year, the average number has been 4, reflecting more confident triaging of patients. Additionally, although the original plan was for children to be redirected to the Royal Hospital for Sick Children at the weekends, the Board has been able to maintain a daytime weekend rota on all but 3 weekends in 2017 and every weekend so far this year. So, a wide range of children's services continue to be available at St John's, and the vast majority of children requiring services receive them locally at St John's. But where there have been shortcomings, I have been clear with the Board that these must be addressed. For children and their families who have attended RHSC, it is vital that support is provided. The case raised last week by Ms Constance at First Minister's Questions was of great concern to me, and I asked the Board to confirm that an apology would be made to the family and that expenses would be reimbursed. This has been done. This was a distressing time for the family, and the Board have been left in no doubt that this was unacceptable and must not be repeated. They have acknowledged these shortcomings and have now ensured that staff at St John's and at the Royal Hospital are clear about support available to parents and carers for travel expenses. Last summer, NHS Lothian asked the Royal College of Paediatrics and Child Health to review its efforts to secure sustainable 24/7 staffing model and the interim model it had put in place. The college's report reiterated that the preferred option remained a 24-hour model, reflecting the population projections for West Lothian. The college report envisaged a 3 to 5 year programme to develop a clear vision and to recruit sufficient trained medical and nursing staff to provide sustainable overnight care. The report concluded that in the meantime, the current daytime-only paediatric assessment and decision-making service should be maintained. The Board is working to develop and deliver a 24/7 service that is safe and sustainable. This requires a staffing rota that ensures resilience to sick leave and any other short-notice reductions in staff availability, the majority of shifts being filled by permanent staff so that rotas can be planned over a 6-month period, and a model that equates to having 2 tiers of trained staff to look after the children of West Lothian overnight, consultant paediatricians supported by a second full rota of other medical and nursing staff. Presiding Officer, one of the first actions I took on taking up post as Health Secretary was to write to NHS Lothian to press them on how the Board could make further progress towards a 24/7 service. I asked the Board to escalate efforts to recruit to the Advanced Nurse Practitioner training programmes for both paediatric and neonatal nurses. I also asked for confirmation that all available recruitment activity to these programmes was being undertaken to the speediest timeframe possible. NHS Lothian have reviewed the recruitment activity since the original report from the Royal College in 2016 and have concluded that a model of care delivered mainly by consultants and other medical staff will not fully deliver their absolute commitment to reinstating the inpatient service at St John's. Currently, the Board has enough staff to cover the extended hour daytime service on 7 days a week. The Board recognises that a different approach is required to provide a safe and sustainable inpatient service and are now actively progressing the development of the multidisciplinary team made up of medical staff and advanced paediatric nurse practitioners. My apologies, Presiding Officer, my paper got stuck together. There is encouraging progress to report, with training underway and one advanced paediatric nurse practitioner already able to support the out-of-hours rota. Another will be able to do this from October onwards, and there is one nurse currently on maternity leave who will complete her training by the end of 2019. Additionally, the Board has just recruited 3 more trainees, 2 of whom will be available to support the rota in a year's time, and the third will be available the following year. And 2 advanced neonatal nurse practitioners start training this month. Recruitment activity to staff the model is live, and in order to build resilience, the Board has committed to, and I quote, over-recruit to both the consultant and advanced paediatric nurse practitioner posts. This should mitigate the risks associated with the impact of sickness or any other absences or long-term leave. This means that in addition to the next round of advertisements for 2 consultants due to go out in October, the Board will also advertise for additional qualified or trainee advanced paediatric nurse practitioners and will offer posts to all applicants, medical and nursing, who have been assessed as appointable through the recruitment process. I have received an assurance from the Chief Executive that the Board has set milestones for a reinstatement of the service, as adequate and safe levels of staffing are in place, with the aim of having the service back on a sustainable basis as quickly as possible. The Board will continue to review progress regularly, and they will bring forward a contingency plan should progress fall below the trajectory. I have asked the Director-General for Health and Social Care and the Chief Medical Officer for Scotland to review progress for me by the end of January and report to me. I intend to inform Parliament of the situation at that time to ensure members are updated on progress. Presiding Officer, the Board's improved approach to developing a sustainable model of service is welcome. I've asked the Chief Nursing Officer for Scotland to liaise with NHS Lothian and provide advice and support to them on the training and development of advanced paediatric nurse practitioner appointees. These discussions are underway, and I expect to receive a report by the end of October. I know members and the local community are anxious to know when the 24/7 service will be reinstated, and I share that anxiety and that concern. The Board Chief Executive has sought to assure me that the reinstatement of the full 24/7 paediatric service has the full commitment of the Board and will continue to receive the highest level of priority. That too is my commitment, and as we have done, we will continue to act to bring that about. Thank you.
Environment Scotland of political censorship after HES decided not to grant permission for the set-up of staging, stalls and branding during the upcoming March for Independence event on Saturday the 6th of October. In a statement, March organiser Gary Kelly said, "We do not accept this political discrimination wraps up as taking a stance on political neutrality." Responding to All Under One banner, HES released a statement saying that as a non-departmental public body, they must remain politically neutral at all times, and that they do not permit political events of any nature to take place within the properties in their care. A previous request by Better Together to hold an event in Holyrood Park in 2014 was also blocked. The government has appointed a minister to protect food supplies throughout the Brexit process, following concerns about the effects of a no-deal departure from the European Union. Commenting on the appointment, former Lib Dem leader Tim Farron MP said, "The government is panicking because they know what no deal will mean for Britain, even though they still won't be honest with the British people about what it will mean for them." He added, "We might laugh at this Dad's Army approach, but it's deadly serious. The government is now expecting food shortages within a year. There's still time to stop this mess." The Scottish Parliament today discussed the advantages of paternity leave in a debate led by SNP MSP Fulton McGregor. The presumption that women are primarily responsible for raising children was challenged, whilst the argument that paternity leave leads to a range of positive outcomes, such as tackling wider societal inequality and a reduction in incidences of postnatal depression, was upheld. Speaking in the debate, the Coatbridge and Christen MSP's speech called for all employers in Scotland to provide paternity leave beyond the mandatory 2-week period. He said, "We can call on the UK government, local authorities, health boards, other public bodies and private companies to follow the Scottish government and introduce 4 weeks paternity leave as a minimum. It's another small step on the way to the Scotland we want to become." India's new Chief Justice of the Supreme Court has struck down on a 158-year-old law that treated adultery in certain cases as a criminal offence, which was published by up to 5 years in prison. The court called the law, which did not allow a wife to prosecute a husband, unconstitutional, and noted that a husband is not the master of a woman. The verdict said that whilst adultery can still be grounds for divorce in India, a criminal penalty violated women's protection to equal rights under the law. The latest decision comes after a wave of verdicts in recent weeks which granted more rights to women and religious minorities, as Chief Justice Deepak Mishra prepares to retire from the bench next month after a 13-year tenure. Earlier this month, the Mishra-led court also struck down on a colonial-era law which made gay sex punishable by up to 10 years in prison, in a huge win for LGBT rights in India. A new anti-hate crime campaign has been launched by the Scottish Government and Police Scotland in a bid to encourage witnesses to report hate crime. The campaign features a series of letters or posters written from the perspective of hate crime witnesses, addressing key areas with emotive headlines, such as "Dear Transphobes," "Dear Homophobes," "Dear Disableists," "Dear Bigots," and "Dear Racists." In the last year, there were over 5,300 charges of hate crime reported to the Procurator Fiscal in Scotland, with many other incidents not being reported to the police. Launching the campaign in Edinburgh yesterday, Justice Secretary Hamza Yousaf said, "As somebody who has faced Islamophobic and racial abuse over the years, I know how upsetting being a victim of hate crime can be. Hate crime and prejudice are completely unacceptable and we're absolutely committed to tackling it." 2 men aged 38 and 19 have been arrested and will be appearing at Kirkcaldy Sheriff Court following large-scale disturbances in the Thornton area of Fife. The first disturbance took place in the Balbegging Avenue area on the 20th of July, and a further one which took place on the M90 motorway near Dunfermline on the 25th of July. In response to the incidents, a day of action was organised by the CID and response and community officers from the Fife Police Division. They were also supported by the National Operational Support Unit, Road Policing and Dog Section, and carried out a pre-planned operation in the Thornton area yesterday, where the 2 men were arrested. In addition to the arrests, the officers recovered a number of weapons, including a firearm and ammunition. Police in Dundee have recovered a man's body in the Grassy Beach area this morning after a phone call from a member of the public. Officers do not believe that there are any suspicious circumstances, and the family of a man who is believed to have entered the River Tay from Tay Bridge earlier this month have been informed. The police and the family of George Murdoch, a taxi driver from Aberdeen, are making a renewed appeal for information ahead of the 35th anniversary of his death, in the hope that the perpetrator of the attack can finally be brought to justice. Better known as Dodd to his family, the taxi driver picked up what would turn out to be his last ever passenger in the West End of the city on September 29, 1983, before he was attacked and later died. A new photograph has been released today of George and his wife at his nephew's wedding. An image of an identical replica of the cheese wire that was used during the attack has also been released. Police Scotland's major investigation team, MIT, continues to review and investigate the case with the development of forensic and investigative techniques. A reward of up to £10,000 is available for information and has been put up by the victim's family. Scotland's 8 Catholic bishops met Pope Francis in the Vatican this morning at the beginning of their Ad Lumina, or 5 yearly visits to Rome, and thanked him for his support and prayers. After saying Mass at the tomb of St. Peter in St. Peter's Basilica, the bishops then met with Pope Francis for an hour and 40 minutes in front of a private audience where they discussed a range of topics, including nuclear disarmament. People in Scotland will be encouraged to fill out their census questionnaire digitally for the first time in 2021. Plans for Scotland's Consensus 2021, published by National Records of Scotland, allows how the census will be conducted online and what questions will be asked. Under the proposals, the census will now ask whether the respondent is a veteran. It is also proposed to ask questions on sexual orientation and transgender status, ahead of a bill which will be introduced this parliamentary session to allow such questions to be asked on a voluntary basis, as set out in the 2018 to 2019 Programme for Government. Support and assistance will be available for those who need help accessing it, and the final proposed questions will be laid before the Scottish Parliament for agreement before the census takes place. Now back again to the Kavanagh hearing. President Donald Trump has said that he would be open to withdrawing his nomination for his Supreme Court pick, Brett Kavanaugh, if he finds the testimony about sexual assaults against him to be credible. Ahead of the hearing, Trump said at a press conference in New York that he would change his mind about his nomination if he thought the judge was guilty of something like this, after Democrats demanded that Trump either withdraw the nomination or order an FBI investigation. 4 women in total have made allegations against the judge, including Dr. Christine Blasey Ford, a university professor who gave her testimony today.
And generally, let us know if there's any issues. Proceed, please.
Thank you, Senator Grassley. I think after I read my opening statement, I anticipate needing some caffeine, if that is available.
Okay. Can you pull the microphone just a little bit closer to you, please?
Okay.
Can the whole box go a little bit closer?
I'm trying, Senator. No.
Okay. Well, then
I'll lean forward.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Is this good?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Chairman Grassley and Ranking Member Feinstein, members of the committee. My name is Christine Blasey Ford. I am a professor of psychology at Palo Alto University and a research psychologist at the Stanford University School of Medicine. I won't detail my educational background since it has already been summarized. I have been married to Russell Ford since 2002, and we have 2 children. I am here today not because I want to be. I am terrified. I am here because I believe it is my civic duty to tell you what happened to me while Brett Kavanaugh and I were in high school. I have described the events publicly before. I summarized them in my letter to Ranking Member Feinstein and again in a letter to Chairman Grassley. I understand and appreciate the importance of your hearing from me directly about what happened to me and the impact that it has had on my life and on my family. I grew up in the suburbs of Washington, D.C. I attended the Holton Arms School in Bethesda, Maryland from 1978 to 1984. Holton Arms is an all-girls school that opened in 1901. During my time at the school, Girls at Holton Arms frequently met and became friendly with boys from all boys' schools in the area, including the Landon School, Georgetown Prep, Gonzaga High School, as well as our country clubs and other places where kids and families socialized. This is how I met Brett Kavanaugh, the boy who sexually assaulted me. During my freshman and sophomore school years, when I was 14 and 15 years old, my group of friends intersected with Brett and his friends for a short period of time. I had been friendly with a classmate of Brett's for a short time during my freshman and sophomore year. And it was through that connection that I attended a number of parties that Brett also attended. We did not know each other well, but I knew him and he knew me. In the summer of 1982, like most summers, I spent most every day at the Columbia Country Club in Chevy Chase, Maryland, swimming and practicing diving. One evening that summer, after a day of diving at the club, I attended a small gathering at a house in the Bethesda area. There were 4 boys I remember specifically being at the house: Brett Kavanaugh, Mark Judge, a boy named PJ, and one other boy whose name I cannot recall. I also remember my friend Leland attending. I do not remember all of the details of how that gathering came together, but like many that summer, it was almost surely a spur-of-the-moment gathering. I truly wish I could be more helpful with more detailed answers to all of the questions that have and will be asked about how I got to the party and where it took place and so forth. I don't have all the answers, and I don't remember as much as I would like to. But the details about that night that bring me here today are the ones I will never forget. They have been seared into my memory and have haunted me episodically as an adult. When I got to the small gathering, people were drinking beer in a small living room, family room type area on the first floor of the house. I drank 1 beer. Brett and Mark were visibly drunk. Early in the evening, I went up a very narrow set of stairs leading from the living room to a second floor to use the restroom. When I got to the top of the stairs, I was pushed from behind into a bedroom across from the bathroom. I couldn't see who pushed me. Brett and Mark came into the bedroom and locked the door behind them. There was music playing in the bedroom. It was turned up louder by either Brett or Mark once we were in the room. I was pushed onto the bed, and Brett got on top of me. He began running his hands over my body and grinding into me. I yelled, hoping that someone downstairs might hear me, and I tried to get away from him, but his weight was heavy. Brett groped me and tried to take off my clothes. He had a hard time because he was very inebriated and because I was wearing a one-piece bathing suit underneath my clothing. I believed he was going to rape me. I tried to yell for help. When I did, Brett put his hand over my mouth to stop me from yelling. This is what terrified me the most and has had the most lasting impact on my life. It was hard for me to breathe, and I thought that Brett was accidentally going to kill me. Both Brett and Mark were drunkenly laughing during the attack. They seemed to be having a very good time. Mark seemed ambivalent, at times urging Brett on, and at times telling him to stop. A couple of times I made eye contact with Mark and thought he might try to help me, but he did not. During this assault, Mark came over and jumped on the bed twice while Brett was on top of me. And the last time that he did this, we toppled over and Brett was no longer on top of me. I was able to get up and run out of the room. Directly across from the bedroom was a small bathroom. I ran inside the bathroom and locked the door. I waited until I heard Brett and Mark leave the bedroom, laughing, and loudly walk down the narrow stairway, pinballing off the walls on the way down. I waited, and when I did not hear them come back up the stairs, I left the bathroom, went down the same stairwell, through the living room, and left the house. I remember being on the street and feeling an enormous sense of relief that I had escaped that house and that Brett and Mark were not coming outside after me. Brett's assault on me drastically altered my life. For a very long time, I was too afraid and ashamed to tell anyone these details. I did not want to tell my parents that I, at age 15, was in a house without any parents present, drinking beer with boys. I convinced myself that because Brett did not rape me, I should just move on and just pretend that it didn't happen. Over the years, I told very, very few friends that I had this traumatic experience. I told my husband before we were married that I had experienced a sexual assault. I had never told the details to anyone, the specific details, until May 2012 during a couples counseling session. The reason this came up in counseling is that my husband and I had completed a very extensive, very long remodel of our home, and I insisted on a second front door, an idea that he and others disagreed with and could not understand. In explaining why I wanted a second front door, I began to describe the assault in detail. I recall saying that the boy who assaulted me could someday be on the U.S. Supreme Court, and spoke a bit about his background at an elitist all-boys school in Bethesda, Maryland. My husband recalls that I named my attacker as Brett Kavanaugh. After that May 2012 therapy session, I did my best to ignore the memories of the assault, because recounting them caused me to relive the experience and caused panic and anxiety. Occasionally, I would discuss the assault in an individual therapy session, but talking about it caused more reliving of the trauma, so I tried not to think about it or discuss it. But over the years, I went through periods where I thought about the attack. I had confided in some close friends that I had had an experience with sexual assault. Occasionally, I stated that my assailant was a prominent lawyer or judge, but I did not use his name. I do not recall each person I spoke to about Brett's assault, and some friends have reminded me of these conversations since the publication of the Washington Post story on September 16, 2018. But until July 2018, I had never named Mr. Kavanaugh as my attacker outside of therapy. This changed in early July 2018. I saw press reports stating that Brett Kavanaugh was on the short list of a list of very well-qualified Supreme Court nominees. I thought it was my civic duty to relay the information I had about Mr. Kavanaugh's conduct so that those considering his nomination would know about this assault. On July 6th, I had a sense of urgency to relay the information to the Senate and the President as soon as possible before a nominee was selected. I did not know how specifically to do this. I called my congressional representative and let her receptionist know that someone on the President's shortlist had attacked me. I also sent a message to the encrypted Washington Post confidential tip line. I did not use my name, but I provided the names of Brett Kavanaugh and Mark Judge. I stated that Mr. Kavanaugh had assaulted me in the 1980s in Maryland. This was an extremely hard thing for me to do, but I felt that I couldn't not do it. Over the next 2 days, I told a couple of close friends on the beach in Aptos, California, that Mr. Kavanaugh had sexually assaulted me. I was very conflicted as to whether to speak out. On July 9th, I received a return phone call from the office of Congresswoman Anna Eshoo after Mr. Kavanaugh had become the nominee. I met with her staff on July 18th and with her on July 20th, describing the assault and discussing my fears about coming forward. Later, we discussed the possibility of sending a letter to Ranking Member Feinstein, who is one of my state's senators, describing what occurred. My understanding is that Representative Eshu's office delivered a copy of my letter to Senator Feinstein's office on July 30th. The letter included my name, but also a request that it be kept confidential. My hope was that providing the information confidentially would be sufficient to allow the Senate to consider Mr. Kavanaugh's serious misconduct without having to make myself, my family, or anyone's family vulnerable to the personal attacks and invasions of privacy that we have faced since my name became public. In a letter dated August 31st, Senator Feinstein wrote that she would not share the letter without my explicit consent, and I appreciated this commitment. Sexual assault victims should be able to decide for themselves when and whether their private experience is made public. As the hearing date got closer, I struggled with a terrible choice. Do I share the facts with the Senate and put myself and my family in the public spotlight? Or do I preserve our privacy and allow the Senate to make its decision without knowing the full truth of his past behaviors? I agonized daily with this decision throughout August and September 2018. The sense of duty that originally motivated me to reach out confidentially to the Washington Post and to Anna Eshu's office when there was still a list of extremely qualified candidates, and to Senator Feinstein was always there, but my fears of the consequences of speaking out started to exponentially increase. During August 2018, the press reported that Mr. Kavanaugh's confirmation was virtually certain. Persons painted him as a champion of women's rights and empowerment, and I believed that if I came forward, my single voice would be drowned out by a chorus of powerful supporters. By the time of the confirmation hearings, I had resigned myself to remaining quiet and letting the committee and the Senate make their decision without knowing what Mr. Kavanaugh had done to me. Once the press started reporting on the existence of the letter I had sent to Senator Feinstein, I faced mounting pressure. Reporters appeared at my home and at my workplace, demanding information about the letter in the presence of my graduate students. They called my bosses and coworkers and left me many messages, making it clear that my name would inevitably be released to the media. I decided to speak out publicly to a journalist who had originally responded to the tip I had sent to the Washington Post and who had gained my trust. It was important for me to describe the details of the assault in my own words. Since September 16th, the date of the Washington Post story, I have experienced an outpouring of support from people in every state of this country. Thousands and thousands of people who have had their lives dramatically altered by sexual violence have reached out to share their experience and have thanked me for coming forward. We have received tremendous support from our friends and our community. At the same time, my greatest fears have been realized, and the reality has been far worse than what I expected. My family and I have been the target of constant harassment and death threats, and I have been called the most vile and hateful names imaginable. These messages, while far fewer than the expressions of support, have been terrifying and have rocked me to my core. People have posted my personal information and that of my parents online on the internet. This has resulted in additional emails, calls, and threats. My family and I were forced to move out of our home. Since September 16th, my family and I have been visiting in various secure locales, at times separated and at times together, with the help of security guards. This past Tuesday evening, my work email was hacked and messages were sent out trying to recant my description of the sexual assault. Apart from the assault itself, These past couple of weeks have been the hardest of my life. I've had to relive this trauma in front of the world, and I've seen my life picked apart by people on television, on Twitter, other social media, other media, and in this body who have never met me or spoken with me. I have been accused of acting out of partisan political motives. Those who say that do not know me. I am an independent person and I am no one's pawn. My motivation in coming forward was to be helpful and to provide facts about how Mr. Kavanaugh's actions have damaged my life so that you could take into a serious consideration as you make your decision about how to proceed. It is not my responsibility to determine whether Mr. Kavanaugh deserves to sit on the Supreme Court. My responsibility is to tell you the truth. I understand that a professional prosecutor has been hired to ask me questions, and I'm committed to doing my very best to answer them. I have never been questioned by a prosecutor, and I will do my best. At the same time, because the committee members will be judging my credibility, I do hope to be able to engage directly with each of you. And at this point, I will do my best to answer your questions and would request some caffeine.
A Coke or something?
That sounds good. That would be great. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
That's all for tonight. Thank you very much for watching, and we will see you next time. Good evening.